three big stories that are out there. NBA returning, not sure that the microscope has ever been more substantially trained upon them. When you look at the hypocrisy in the league as they prepare to make an incredibly substantial social justice warrior statement, the silence on China continues to grow. The hypocrisy is insane. Speaking of hypocrisy, Joe Kelly gets 8 games for not even hitting a Houston Astros player, even though no Houston Astros player was actually suspended at all for the cheating scandal. Big swing and a miss there for Rob Manfred. And the ACC releases their plan for college football season, 10 conference games, plus potentially one more in-state game if that is able to happen. And Notre Dame will be joining the ACC for the season and playing 10 conference games. First year that Notre Dame will have been a member in the ACC a member of any conference since 1887, since they started playing college football in the first place. Going to bring in the crew. Of those three, which one stands out to you as being the most significant story? We spent a lot of time, talking about them. To me, it's the NBA and China because the NBA's China relationship was blown up by a major ESPN story that came out yesterday afternoon. Now, I'm curious whether they'll talk about that story at all on ESPN television. But for many people, myself included, and I think many people who are listening to us right now, the idea that the NBA is, quote-unquote, a woke social justice warrior league, yet they are taking billions of dollars from China, is an inherent hypocrisy that the league has to address in some way. So I know I said which is the biggest story, but let's start there. Danny G, will you be thinking about that at all in the back of your mind as the NBA makes whatever statement they make to return their season?
Well, it's going to be hard not to think about that, especially working on Outkick and hearing your many monologues about it. And not just that, but I hope that what happens prior to the game doesn't overshadow.
I think it probably will.
And I think it will at first, too. And my question is, will we recover from it? I mean, with baseball, you spent one morning talking about Mookie Betts and a little bit of it, and then it blew over pretty quickly.
I don't know. This is a good question for you because I haven't watched the start of any baseball games to speak of. I mean, I watched last night's Dodgers-Astros game and everything else. But it's a small minority of the overall players that are making any kind of statement in baseball. And also, to be fair, like baseball made a big deal about how, like for the first game they had BLM on the mound and everything else. It doesn't really seem like there's any sort of integrated portion of the game now where that's really noticeable, right? I mean, if you're just turning on a baseball game, I think the most noticeable thing about a baseball game is how often they cut to shots of the crowd if there's nobody there. But you've watched more baseball than I have. It doesn't seem like the baseball players really want to get that involved in social justice because, for the most part, I haven't seen any conversations about it.
Well, and I think a lot of it has to do with the television networks who are covering the actual game.
You don't see the national anthem before most baseball games.
That's what I was going to say. They go right to the game. And baseball quickly transitioned to what was happening on the field. Even the announcers switched their attention to the rivalry between the Dodgers and the Astros most recently. So, yeah, you're right. We got to baseball, and now it's just about baseball. I'm wondering with the NBA, can that transition happen?
Well, I think one reason is nobody really covered Mookie Betts. I think that baseball put out notice to their – I really believe this happened. I think baseball put out notice to their television partners and said, hey, we're going to make a statement on the opening Thursday night, cover it, and then if you guys turn this into a huge story, it's going to really hurt your ratings on television. You better just move on from it. And because I haven't heard, like Mookie Betts is a pretty big name guy to be kneeling, right? He's the biggest name athlete who's ever taken a knee before. And almost immediately there was no coverage of that story. And I don't think they're playing any of the national anthem before the start of games. You can tweet me and let me know.
No, they're not.
They're not, right, Roberto?
No, usually that's just a big thing for like opening day where they
right.
show the national anthem and stuff like that.
I assume they're playing the national anthem in these stadiums before the games are played, which is a little bit strange without fans present at all. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is I wonder if after tonight's NBA games, which are going to be just crazy, like the start of Major League Baseball will, whether ESPN is going to start cutting out the national anthems. And so the only thing you'll see, I don't even know if they'll have player introductions, because player introduction seems ridiculous to me when there's no crowd there either. Like, we know who the players are. To me, why can't you just start the game when basically the players are walking out for the tip?
Yeah.
So I think that's intriguing. Dub, what do you think? Are you going to think about the hypocrisy when all the bells and whistles of the NBA season begin this evening?
Yeah, I think Danny G put it best. It's hard not to when all these stories come out, especially the ESPN story. And I agree with that caller. My first reaction when I saw the ESPN story was I was pretty shocked that ESPN even did that story, considering their relationship with the NBA and the television rights and that deal that they have. So that was really maybe the first thing I thought of initially when I saw that story was, wow, I'm kind of just surprised that ESPN even ran with this story.
I think they felt compelled to, honestly, after the Woj FU email. I wonder if they would have run the story if that didn't happen. I really do. And I'll be curious. To their credit, they dropped the story, meaning they released it. I'll be curious if they talk about it at all on any ESPN programming. Because the story, I mean, again, there is someone in there who says, like, basically the NBA's relationship with China, these basketball camps they run, it's like Nazi Germany. And I just think there are a lot of Americans, and we talked about this with Whitlock. Some people say, well, why do you care? And I care because China sent a virus around the world that they helped to try to cover up. It may have come out of a Chinese laboratory. And the coronavirus, which came out of China, is going to be more devastating to the American economy than anything Nazi Germany did to us in the 1930s or the 1940s. More people directly are impacted by the coronavirus and China's mishandling of it and potential creation of this strain from a laboratory in Wuhan. It still is unclear exactly where this virus came from or how it got out of China. There's a lot of intelligence evidence that suggests that it was being manipulated in some way in a Chinese laboratory and then got out. But the fact that China didn't stop the spread of this virus and that it's now spread all around the world, that, first of all, is more devastating to the American economy than anything Nazi Germany did to our economy, all right? Second, I can't stop thinking about the degree to which our social media is being used and manipulated by people in China, by people in Russia, by American enemies around the world to make us fight internally while China is kicking our ass, and we're not even aware that we're getting our ass kicked by China because we're so mad at each other in this country. And so I really think that part of my job is to point out when American sports are being used as propaganda and as points of division, and we are missing the larger issue here. I'm not old, at least I don't feel old, but I'm old enough to remember the Cold War with Russia. And right now we are in a Cold War with China, only it feels like China's the only ones that recognize this is going and dividing us, people, a lot to drive down and destroy American institutions, which makes us weaker, which allows China's influence around the globe to increase. And China right now, people always talk, and this is a big deal. People love to talk about being on the right side of history. That's a phrase that has gotten really popular. And frankly, it's a phrase that people who don't study history very often embrace. And you're talking to a guy who spent his life as a history, as someone who is obsessed with history, right? And so one of the things you learn is history makes you humble, because you find out that many things you thought were correct are not actually correct if you study history. It can take hundreds of years for, quote unquote, the right side of history to be revealed. But what it doesn't take any time at all to know is that being on the side of basic human rights is the right side of history. Being on the side of the First Amendment, of freedom of speech, of freedom of religion, being on the right side of women being able to choose how many kids they want to have. Those are all easy decisions to make to be on the right side of history. Right now, the NBA and its players, its coaches, its executives, they are choosing to be on the side of modern-day Nazis in China. They are ripping American institutions to the high heavens while simultaneously shutting up and dribbling for China. And that is going to be on display for everyone in America tonight with the return of the NBA. The hypocrisy is going to be more glaring and apparent than I have ever seen before in the history of American sports. This would be like if back in the 1930s, American athletes had decided to kneel for the national anthem in Major League Baseball, which was America's pastime back in the day, because they were upset at the things that America stood for, while they were simultaneously taking money from Nazi Germany and weren't saying a word about Adolf Hitler. So you want to talk about the right side of history. NBA players are denigrating American institutions and values, which are unquestionably on the right side of history, and they aren't saying a word about modern-day Nazis in China. And I just sit here and I think to myself, how in the world are all these sports media members who claim that they want to cover the truth not actually speaking truth to power to NBA players and owners and executives? I mean, if Adam Silver had a spine at all, he would say, we are walking away from China because we reject the values that they represent right now in the world. Instead, Adam Silver said that the NBA had mutual respect for China. It's unfathomable to me that this is allowed to happen, and that many people in the American sports media are going to praise to the high heavens whatever NBA players do tonight, while not even mentioning the rank hypocrisy of their actions as it pertains to China. And I don't know if it's because most people in American sports media are not smart enough to understand actually significant issues. Like, it's relatively easy to have an opinion on an 8-game suspension for Joe Kelly, right? I think Major League Baseball got that wrong. It's relatively easy to have an opinion on Notre Dame playing in the ACC. That's a fun story, and there are lots of people in sports media that will have opinions on it. But wouldn't you rather have an opinion about something that actually matters in the sport in which you cover, which is NBA athletes and owners and coaches all being awful hypocrites and embracing basically modern-day Nazism in China, with the concentration camps, with the increasing attempts to grab more and more power and influence and land, with what they're doing to Hong Kong, and all of this directly connected to the Daryl Morey tweet? I mean, make no mistake about it, the NBA is taking Chinese blood money and saying nothing at all about it. And so what is your point in talking about sports if you're going to come on and praise NBA players, coaches, and athletes and organizations for taking a stand and ignore the fact that they are refusing to take a stand in exchange for money about the biggest human rights issues in their lifetime? People want to compare LeBron James to Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali wouldn't have stood for what China's doing. If LeBron was really brave and really wanted to take a stand, he'd be willing to risk Space Jam 2 not showing in Beijing movie theaters in order to say, I support basic human rights around the world. He won't say it. He will not criticize China. Neither will Steve Kerr. Neither will Greg Popovich. Every time Donald Trump sends a tweet, these dudes come out and rip Donald Trump to the high heavens, but they won't say, we support democracy in China. You're fine ripping American institutions when there's no risk to you whatsoever. In fact, when the stupid American sports media will actually praise you for doing so, but you won't say a negative word about China at all because you're fine taking modern-day Nazi blood money. As long as China wants you to shut up and dribble, you will do it. More than an athlete, my ass. Eddie, you do updates all the time. Are you going to find it impossible not to think about the hypocrisy when the NBA players make whatever statement they do before the season starts?
Yeah, especially since I think that is going to be the big story, because these aren't playoff games. These are quote unquote regular season games that really don't mean anything. I know that Danny G and Roberto and NBA fans will be excited because it's the first real games. But I'm curious if this story would have come out if the NBA playoffs were starting tonight and everyone was really invested right from the get-go. I wonder if this story would have come out or not. And I agree with you. I will give ESPN credit for coming out with a story. I don't think it's going to be a hot topic on a lot of their shows. If you look on their website right now, it's not even listed on any of their top headlines.
Oh, they brought it out and then they kind of buried it.
Yeah, you've got the Rutgers football outbreak is they've got that listed, but not the
Now,
story.
What do you think? Do you think it's because most people in sports media are not smart enough to talk about this issue, so they run away from it? Or do you think they're afraid of being like, why would this not be a lead story everywhere when you think about the significance of this story? Is it like you do updates, so you're literally in the news business of deciding what news stories should be. Why do you think, like, for all like national sports shows, I bet I am one of the only, if not the only show that will actually spend substantial time talking about this on a program today? Why do you think that is?
Well, I think, look, to me, there's us and there's ESPN, and the rest of them are just kind of there.
Yeah.
And ESPN obviously has a relationship with the NBA. I mean,
so you think that ESPN talent's being told, hey, you can't talk about China?
I think that's part of it, yeah.
It may be true. I mean, there may have been a memo that goes out to, all the different ESPN shows and says, hey, we're not going to talk about the NBA's relationship with China. And if so, if that's actually occurring, then you as the American sporting public deserve to know that. Because here's what I value more than anything. You may not agree with me, but no one is telling me at all what my opinion can be on any subject under the sun any day when I sit down in front of this mic. And I think everybody will agree on the show. I don't ever come on and say, hey, your opinion has to be X or Y. Have I ever you guys don't have to agree with anything that I say. And the point is, the First Amendment is alive and well on this show. And I think that's why this show is growing so massively, because I think inherently a lot of you out there listening feel like other people that you listen or watch are not telling you what they actually think, and or they're not being completely honest with you. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I get things wrong all the time. My predictions are wrong. If I get a fact wrong, I try to come on and be like, hey, I got a fact wrong. That's what I really care about, getting honest truth in front of you. My opinions based on those facts can sometimes be wrong. But I mean, I think there's a reason why this is the most honest show anywhere in sports media. And I think it's because I frankly wouldn't do it. If somebody set me down and said, hey, you can only talk about these 3 topics today, I'd be like, all right, peace out. I'm done. I mean, since I started this show, I said, I'll do it, but I have to have complete authority over every subject that we do every single day. And to their credit, Fox Sports Radio gave it to me. But I don't think there are very many people in my business who have that. And I think there are also a lot of people who are afraid in order to do it. Roberto, do you think, will this be in the back of your mind when all the NBA players are making their statements tonight, the fact that, hey, you're taking billions of dollars from modern-day Nazis and not saying a word about them, but you want to tear down American values and institutions?
Honestly, man, I don't think I'll be thinking about it.
Are you going to watch?
I'm gonna watch, but then I'll probably be switching back and forth from the Lakers and Dodger game. I don't care about players' stance on social issues, and or what they stand or don't stand for. I don't care whether they're a player leans.
I think that's actually the vast majority of fans.
Yeah, I don't care
your perspective.
Yeah, I don't care whether a player leans left or right. I watch sports to enjoy the competition, and to watch hopefully my teams win and for the love I had for the game that I used to play. That's the reason why I watch sports.
I think it's hard. I'm curious to see how they're going to cover it because it was impossible to watch the start of Major League Baseball without like 15 minutes of political statements being made. And I think there's going to be a massive amount of political statements being made tonight by the NBA. Unfortunately, if you're going to get into politics, the most important political statement, which is we absolutely and without equivocation condemn everything that China stands for, you're not going to hear it from a single NBA player, executive, or coach.